What's up guys, whether you like the sound of your enemies being fried, like the animation, or in general just seeks a powerful beginner friendly build for you to start out the league with, then look no further. This build is viable for both softcore and hardcore gameplay. It deals tons of damage and has excellent clear speed. The build is very budget friendly and can be played without any unique items. That said, there is a few very powerful ones that I'm going to recommend later on in the guide. For defenses, this build makes use of a high energy shield pool coupled with Eldritch Battery, Mind Over Matter, Arctic Armor, a cast when damage taken setup, and with the right unique item it will freeze your enemies, making them much easier to deal with. Eldritch Battery further allows you to fuel the cost of your skills via energy shield, thus enabling you to reserve all of your mana for additional buffs. And to prevent you from running out of energy shield when spamming arc, the build further utilizes the Ghost Reaver keystone, which makes it so that you leech energy shield instead of life. This together with a life leech gem in your damage setup is all you need in order to sustain the cost of your skill. Your main damage setup consists of arc, spell echo, faster casting and life leech. When you get a 5th link, add in added lightning damage, and for your 6th link add in an empower of level 2 or higher. The main weakness of arc is its single target damage. To help this I recommend using Vault Stormcall, spell echo, added lightning damage and increased duration. Using this setup against rare monsters and bosses makes them significantly faster to kill. It is however an optional setup, and if you would rather use something else then that is completely fine as well. To improve your mobility and survivability you need to link Whirling Blades with faster attacks and Fortify. Remember that Fortify adds a buff, so whenever you hit an enemy it makes you take 20% less incoming damage from hits for a few seconds. To generate power charges and spread your curse you need to link Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark and Herald of Thunder. If you get yourself a Call of the Brotherhood ring, you need to swap out Herald of Thunder for Herald of Ice, as it adds more damage and the shatter effect is superior to the lightning effect when it comes to generating power charges, but until then, use Herald of Thunder. To further improve your defenses, I also recommend cast when damage taken linked with Arctic Breath, greater multiple projectiles and temporal chains. With this setup, you will whenever you take a big hit cast Arctic Breath and temporal chains at the enemies, thus making them much slower and you much safer. Finally, for a massive damage boost and more survivability, you should use Wrath, Arctic Armor, and to make your life a little easier, add in cast when damage taken and Flame Golem. By doing this you won't have to worry about resummoning the golem all the time by yourself. In order to use Arc, your character needs to complete the Siren's Cadence quest in Act 1. When you've done that you can buy the skill from NASA. Until then, I recommend using Freezing Pulse linked with added lightning damage. If you're interested in spending a bit of currency on cheap leveling items, you can also greatly speed up the leveling process by buying yourself 2 Life Sprig wands and equipping one in each hand. When you reach level 24, I suggest buying yourself a Reverberation Rod and adding in your Arc, faster casting and life leech to this. Finally, at level 53 I recommend buying yourself a Geoffrey's Crest helmet and adding in your Arc setup together with the Spell Echo gem. And once you reach level 70, I recommend you start looking for a cheap 5-link energy shield base armor to replace your Geoffrey's Crest crown setup. Skill tree progression is fairly simple with this type of build. You start as the Templar, pick up the damage and life notables, then head towards the Witch and do the same, and then, you guessed it, do the same at the Shadow start. The only thing I'd recommend is to save the critical strike nodes and power charges for until later on in the game, as they aren't very efficient in the beginning. And when you have more than about 700 energy shield, I'd recommend speccing into Eldritch Battery, Mind Over Matter and Ghost Reaver. As always guys, if you're in doubt on how to spend your skill points, then make sure to check the leveling skill tree templates listed in the forum build guide for a more detailed step-for-step approach. The link is in the description of the video. The ascendancy class of choice for this build is the Inquisitor. Here you need to pick up Righteous Providence, Inevitable Judgment, and then finally Instruments of Virtue. This setup will significantly increase your damage by greatly increasing your critical strike chains, adding a ton of crit multi, allowing critical strikes to ignore enemy elemental resistances, and of course a nice amount of extra spell damage. As for the bandits, you need to help Oak on normal, kill them all in cruel, and help Alira on merciless difficulty for the power charge. For your gear you primarily need to look for affixes such as increased spell damage and lightning damage, critical strike chains and multiplier, cast speed, life and energy shield to make yourself more tanky. Remember, more energy shield makes Mind Over Matter more efficient, and of course enough elemental resistances so that you can be capped at 75% in Merciless. To cover your strength and dexterity requirements of your skill gems, try to get a bit of those attributes on the gear you craft or buy as well. As for unique items, there is, as I mentioned in the beginning of the guide, no mandatory or required ones to make the build work. However, I strongly recommend saving up for a Call of the Brotherhood ring. This ring will increase your lightning damage, but more importantly, convert 50% of your lightning damage to cold damage, allowing you to freeze and shatter your enemies. It also makes it so that you have a 100% chance to shock against these now frozen targets, thus greatly increasing your damage. Besides that, I would also recommend getting Maligaro's Virtuosity for the simple fact that they greatly increase your damage by improving your critical strike chance and multiplier. And lastly, if you manage to get into the high tier maps, getting yourself a Taste of Hate is also a great idea. It'll make you take 30% of physical damage dealt to your character as cold damage. Since you have a high amount of cold resistance, this makes you significantly tankier. It is a pretty expensive item though, and as I said, it isn't required. When it comes to jewels, I recommend looking for a mix of the following affixes: increased maximum life, increased critical strike multiplier, increased spell damage, and increased cast speed. The flask setup I recommend is 2 Divine Life Flasks of Staunching, 1 Ample Granite Flask of Iron Skin, a Basalt Flask, and an Ample Sapphire Flask of Warding to help protect you against curses and reflect damage. If you aren't using the Call of the Brotherhood ring, you should use a Topaz Flask instead. And that's it guys, make sure to check the forum guide for more details and for future updates to the build. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them down in the comment section or in the forum post. If you liked the video and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?